My grandfather was born in 1926 in Asheboro, North Carolina, and most of the books that we found, probably he started collecting when he was 10 to 12-ish. I'm not a comic book collector, so I really had no clue like what we had. Some of them, I think that's going to go for a lot of money, and it goes for $50, and then one that like I don't know anything about will go for thousands of dollars. But it's just interesting to see what the market does.
Jonathan, if I may, let me ask a little bit about your grandfather's journey.
Sure. So he was drafted mid 40s, sent to Fort Bragg for basic training, which that part was super close to home. Sent overseas. He was in France and Germany. He was injured in Germany, shot, and spent the rest of his life with shrapnel in his arm. Was a Purple Heart honoree. He came home, continued the rest of his life, and was never like. I learned about his military service and his honors and what happened after he passed away because it was something that he did, but it wasn't really what defined him. Had a family, built a life. They got married just after he came home and were married for almost, he passed away in August before they would have celebrated their 75th anniversary. I knew him as the Sherwin-Williams man because he spent 30 Williams working for the paint company and retired from there. And then in his retirement, enjoyed woodworking and singing. He was in the choir at his church. He joined a community choir. It was my mom and her brother. He had Down syndrome, and my grandparents brought him home in 1958, and he was a part of the family and a part of life. He passed away in 2020, so for 58 years, he was kind of the center of their world, and he was involved in Boy Scouts. He was involved in community activities, and whatever he needed, that's what they did. And that was the version of my grandparents, like that I knew.
Thanks for sharing, Jonathan. I'd like to hear the journey of those comic books. So
Okay.
I know your grandpa bought them in the 30s and 40s mostly. I think that
Yes.
there's a few 50s books in there as well. How in the world did they survive until today?
Several of them have his name written on them. My grandfather would get one and his buddy would get one that was not that one, and so then they would trade, but he put his name on them because he like wanted to make sure that he got his back. He kept a collection and he had them there at his home. When he got drafted to go to war, in the house where he was living, it was he and his parents, and he had an older sister and she had two kids, and the two kids were spending a good amount of time living with their grandparents and my grandfather, and he wanted to make sure that the comic books were protected while he was gone. So he packed them up and he put them in the attic of the home, and nobody really knew anything about them. In 1982, my great grandmother, his mother, passed away, and she was the last of husband and wife. And in the short period of time with her passing away and getting the estate working, my grandfather's sister also passed away, and her estate was a little more complicated than my great grandparents. And it kind of made things bad to the point that my great grandparents' estate went to auction, and my grandparents had to buy the things they should have inherited. And one of the things that my grandfather bought was the house itself. As a kid, it was a rental, and a renter would move out, and I would go and help him get it prepared for the next renter. The comic books were still in the attic from the 1940s. And so thinking he was going to sell the house at some point, he went into the attic, got them out, organized them. Somewhere mid 2000s, he brought them out of the attic, brought them to his house, and they were cataloged and put in the basement at his house where they stayed until earlier this year.
Now, did you see those comics in the mid 2000s, or was it no?
So earlier this year, my mom and I started cleaning out my grandparents' house because we were going to sell it. Early on in cleaning out the basement, I found a Rubbermaid tote, like you would put your Christmas ornaments in or your old collectibles. Opened it up and it was stacked completely full of comic books. He had toyed with looking at selling them a few years before he passed away, and then just sat on them. So he had left with us the knowledge that there were potentially some of value, but I've never been a comic book collector myself, and I really had no way of really understanding what a value might mean. So I brought them home. Wasn't really sure what I was going to do with them. This was probably like in April, and I got the tub out of my truck and set it in my garage. And it sat there for probably about 2 months before I even decided to open it up or see like what was in the box, other than I knew it was comics. Started some research, reached out to a few people, talked to Rick at Heritage, liked him from the start. He said, you need to catalog them. These are old. Some of them don't smell the best, and I don't really want to do it. So like I probably talked to him the first time in April of this year, and it was like July before I really started cataloging them. And after a couple of hundred titles, I was sitting in my garage one Sunday morning going through them, and I created a spreadsheet, and then I would take a photo of each one, and I was uploading them to a Google Doc. And my wife's like, you should probably send those to him and see if you're even doing it right. At like 9 o'clock one Sunday morning, I sent Rick an email, and at 11 o'clock, I was on the phone with him, and he helped me realize what of value meant. And it took me 2 or 3 days to mentally wrap my head around, because I was thinking the whole collection might be worth, maybe somebody would pay us $3,000 for these. And I have since learned that the collector base is more excited than that.
As a person who's into comic books a lot, I'm always hearing from people discovering collections. And one thing I always ask is the person who is the original owner, when were they born? And Jonathan, your grandfather was born at almost the perfect time to collect comic books because he's born in 1926. And you're thinking, okay, the first Superman is 1938. And then that through the early 40s is just the absolute best time to collect. For all you viewers out there, we're going to look at some of the comic books that are in Robert's, right? That's your grandfather's
Yeah,
name?
that's my grandpa's name. Yeah.
He went by Buddy, is that right?
He went by Betty. Yeah.
So we'll check that out in a minute. All right, folks, as promised, here are the photos of the comic books, and this is every single one that Jonathan sent to me. We're going to scroll through to give you a sense of what is there. Okay, so we've got some true stories. We've got quite a few Western books. Got some neat Archies. So that's a pretty cool one. Number 48 from 1951. Hazel Dan, if you're watching, this one's for you. You got Felix, Little Lulu, Laugh. Got some comedy. And this is very indicative of the 40s and 50s, by the way. You know, a lot of different types of titles. And if you see anything, Jonathan, you can pipe up as well.
Okay.
Millie the Model, some folks like that. Good girl art.
On the screen right now, not a value worthy, but like a question mark that I have in the collection. My grandfather had a ton of comic book Sunday paper sections from the Philadelphia Inquirer, and we have no ties to Pennsylvania that I'm aware of. And I asked my grandmother if she knew where they came from, and she did not
Yeah,
know.
that's interesting. I'm looking at the date, 1942 here. So your grandpa was probably about 16, 15, 16 at that time. So yeah, how the heck did he acquire those? That's interesting. Yeah, so quite a few. That's cool. Scholastic. Okay. And he's also got a few coverless books too. I'll bring this one. It's got the shield on there. This one, it's probably Boy Comics Crime Buster coverless. And I just saw this. I thought, this is weird. There's sort of a fig leaf over a statue guy.
Yes.
I have no idea what that's about. All right. So some more coverless books. This is a big book here. World's Best Comics, #1. And this is oversized too. So most of these books at the time had 64 pages. This had 96. And so that's why it's 15 cents as opposed to 10 cents. Okay. This is one of your cooler books. So this is Superman #11, iconic Fred Ray cover. A few other Supermans here. Got a few neat Wonder Woman. Mutt and Jeff, super popular title at the time. Got a lot of crime books too, and I love the variety here. Did this one stand out to you?
Yes. My grandfather, as I knew him, you know, older in his life, was not super into like crime stories that I knew, but it was, I was not surprised by the Western books, but there were a lot of crime books, and that part was interesting to me because that was not something that like I would have expected.
We got some Mickey Mouse over here. Dagwood, Blondie, and folks, you didn't miss it, did you? Here it is. Captain America Comics #1, from 1941. God, what a beautiful book that is. You can see there's a couple places where he's got Robert Boone written out there. Yeah, so we have it up there up top, and we have it here as well. Interestingly enough, Jonathan, for more modern books, people don't like writing on the covers.
Right.
They think it takes away from it. The older books, and especially more serious collectors, actually really love the writing because it shows some provenance. And so in your case, we know that it's, Robert Buddy. And now we also know, like, why did he write it? Did he just do it because he was practicing his handwriting and he was a little
Right.
kid? No, in this case, he was, 14 or 15 years old when this book came out, when he bought it. He's sharing it with his friends, and he's praying that this book actually comes back to him. Putting his name on it at least increases the probability of it coming back to him to have his family have it, whatever that is, 80 years later.
Yes.
I love it. By the way, folks, you can tell that this book is in better condition than most of the other ones. This went off to CGC. I'm sure it had a little bit of pressing done, and it graded out as a 5.5. I talked to Rick, I was texting him, and he said, what was so amazing is that the best book in the collection also happened to be in the best shape. And so congratulations on that. If you wanted any book to grade out at mid-grade, this is the one. So we've also got a couple other Captain America books. These are nice as well. This is Cap number 6. Love these early caps, especially 1 through 10. This cap's pretty special as well, number 13. I believe that's Tojo that's being hit in the jaw by Cap. You got Bucky in the background. A lot of action there. I like this one too. Here we're looking at what might be Cap 27. Of course, this is the famous book with Cap and Bucky riding the motorcycle. I hope that this is the interior because it's awfully daggone cool. Got some text, got some action comics, a bunch of crime books, which is cool. This is a great crime reporter issue. This is a Matt Baker cover. Folks love Matt Baker, including me. Some Crime Does Not Pay. We got some Flash books over here. Some folks like these girl fights. Here's an example of that. A lot of funny pages. We got some All-Star comics. I always thought if I had like a parent or grandparent born in 1944, this would be a great gift. More Westerns, John Wayne, Tom Mix. Again, good girl art, plenty of that. This is a nice book. Annie Oakley, number 4. Got this, The Texan. This is also a great Matt Baker art cover. Here's one I've never seen before, but I thought this is a really sweet cover. Real Clue Crime Stories, never heard of it. The color, the layout looks pretty cool, and I'm guessing that she's poisoning somebody by the looks of it. All right, let's see. We've got a few other big books in here. This book has gotten really popular. Captain Easy, number 12. I like this one. Got a few Spy Smashers down here. This is one of the bigger books. Plastic Man, number 1.
Wow.
That's neat. It's kind of a gruesome one where you have looks like a Japanese officer bleeding out of the eyes. I don't know why. This book's not worth much. Smiling Jack, number 36, but every time I see it, something about that grin always gets me.
Most of them I don't know a whole lot about, but I find this as Smiling Jack, and it's more like a smirk than a smile. So that's one that stuck out to me from the start. I'm like, maybe Smirking Jack or not Smiling Jack.
You got Joe Palooka, really popular character at the time. He's got quite a few of those. Again, a lot of crime books. Oh, I'll bring up this Joe Palooka. I like this one. I love underwater scenes. This is pretty neat. And for you timely lovers out there, you can't get much better than Marvel Mystery. So we got a couple of nice ones. This is Marvel Mystery number 24. This is an Alex Schomburg cover. Alex Schomburg is my favorite cover artist of all time. And then this is another Schomburg cover. This is like a Nazi execution scene. So pretty brutal. And you got the Human Torch, and at the bottom, Submariner. Got a couple of Batman's down here. This is a cool cover. Bat 25, another motorcycle. So he might have been into motorcycles. That's a couple we've seen already. Some coverless books, unfortunately, but I don't know what issue this is, but this is a pretty sweet interior cover.
Yeah.
Most folks don't know what this is, but it is just an outstanding cover. Crime Buster there in front, and that's the character's Iron Jaw at the back, the villain. This is a big book too. Got our America's War Enemies there at the bottom, and we've got Wonder Woman slinging a bowling ball at them. This is a pretty great one. So that's number 13, Sensation Comics number 13. And what also strikes me as being interesting is, here's a teenager who's buying some comic books, and in about a year, he's going to be sent off to this war.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy to think about.
Some military ones. This is Captain Marvel, which is kind of cool. And I'll show everybody something that I found really interesting. Daredevil. There's an old school Daredevil here. Wilbur. Oh, gotta show this one. This is also Alex Schomburg later on in his career. This is a 1948 book, Exciting Comics number 60. I love these underwater scenes, and it doesn't get much better than that. This is what I wanted to show everybody, how some books get faded over time and how some books look so good. Jonathan, can you see this book and this book?
Yeah.
What do you notice about them?
I would assume at one point in time that their outfit was probably the same color.
That's exactly right. So on this channel, we talk about eye appeal a lot. And both of these books are pretty low grade. They're probably fair to maybe good. But, you have this sort of orangey Captain Marvel here versus, man, this is like piping red hot right here.
Right.
This is a great looking book. I wonder the story of these two books. Like maybe most of those books were out in the sun for a while and got faded. And this one, for some reason, maybe it was like the cover was face down. I don't know, but it sure looks well preserved, at least in terms of color. This is a great patriotic cover, by the way. Look at that, y'all. Wiz Comics number 44. So let's see, we got some other All-Star Comics. And to give you a sense of the age of this, y'all. So this is All-Star Comics number 7. You know what's bad about that, Jonathan?
What's that?
Number 8 is Wonder Woman's first appearance.
Ah,
So he missed it by an issue.
yes.
Okay. And then this is an interesting book too. This is Pep Comics number 17. Great book from MLJ. The Hangman over there is being featured. The shield's in the background. Pep Comics number 17. 5 issues later, in Pep Comics number 22 is the first appearance of Archie. Okay. And then looks like we have some model type
Yeah,
books.
those were a bit surprising to find in the mix.
Then you go down, and this is the last major book, and this is Archie number 1. So not Archie's first appearance, but it is Archie's first full cover, and really cool. Now, my understanding is this is just the cover. Is that
Just
correct?
the cover.
Yeah. However, if you had to pick between having the cover or just having the interior, take the cover every day. If I may, Jonathan, as I was hearing this story unfold, for this collection to go up to auction and for it to benefit the family of Buddy, there's so many minor miracles that had to occur along the way. So maybe number 1 is that he didn't throw them out, or his parents didn't throw them out right after he read them. That was
Right.
very common. Number 2, he was lending these comic books out to his friends, including Captain America Comics number 1.
Yes.
And that book came back to him. So that was a minor miracle. When he went off to war, he had some of his family members kind of preserve the books and put them aside. Another miracle. He comes back, and then the house in which they're the books are residing goes up for auction, and he wins the auction, right?
Yes.
And then he brought it out to somebody at a mall who gave him like a super
Yes.
low ball offer.
Yeah.
He didn't take it. And then finally going to today, you had the wherewithal to check around and you find Rick. Rick is a friend of mine too. Just I'm happy that it worked out, and it's so cool from a comic collecting perspective to see a collection of this magnitude hit the market and to know that backstory too.
It was his job to be the provider and the protector and like to take care of things and like to a fault, I would say. My grandmother retired when I was a kid. My grandfather retired just a few years later. And he took care of the house. He did the laundry. He did the shopping. He did the driving. 85 was the longest anyone in either of their families had ever lived prior to them. When he hurt his back at 90 years old, he thought people would think less of him because he wasn't able to cut the grass himself.
Mm.
Part of it was pride, and part of it was like that's just like what he did. That's what he wanted to do. Well, he and my grandmother, and now my grandmother could stay in the apartment community where they wanted. She was 96 and a half years old, will be 97 in February of next year. 3 years in August he's been gone. And so like, in August, I'm getting these to Rick and we're going to start selling them. And it's like, 3 years after he left us, he can still put us in a position where he can provide for my grandmother.
Everybody out there, I hope you can join me and thank Jonathan for spending this time telling his story, telling his grandfather's story about his grandfather coming up as a kid in the 20s, getting comic books in the 30s and 40s, going off to war, and then living a long and wonderful life. In the comment section, please let me know what you think about that collection. Was there any book that we showed you, but we didn't emphasize it, so we might have missed it a little bit? Let us know about that. And if you can, give a big shout out to Buddy Boone.
One thing that I didn't say, and I'll add it now, I started going through this and we start learning. And I have a 13-year-old daughter who has always been very entrepreneurial. Got everything set up with Rick for Labor Day weekend. We were on vacation in Southwest Virginia, and there were some people like having a yard sale. And my daughter's like, we should stop and see if they have any comic books. We could buy them and then resell them.